Shalom, family and friends. You know, there is a historical figure that is one of my favorites. He lived in the 9th century BC in Israel, and he was a man of God and an eccentric man of God. His name, Elijah. His name means Yahweh, which is the personal name of God, the Lord. The Lord is my God. Yahweh is my God. And he bursts into the scene without really any introduction whatsoever. And he goes to the king of the time, a wicked king called Ahab, and says that this is the word from God, that because of the sins of the nation, of the people, there will be no rain for the next few years until Elijah, who then hears from God, releases the rain. After that, God takes him to a place, a ravine, Kirith Ravine, where for an extended period, he is miraculously fed by ravens who bring food and bread to him every morning and every evening. And he drinks by the stream, by the brook that is beside him. Now, that is all very well, so that's a miracle. But you see, he had declared that there would be no rain, that there would be drought. And so, of course, in time, the stream itself dries up. And so then God leads him to the next place, a place called Zarephath, where he comes to see a widow and a son. And the widow has only a handful of flour and a little oil in the jug. And she was going to make the last bit of bread for herself and the son. And essentially after that, there was nothing left in the house. And so, but Elijah is prompted by God that through this widow and through this son, he will be provided. And miraculously, even as the widow uses that bit of flour and a bit of oil, after it's used, the jug and the jar is continuously filled. It was another miraculous provision of God. You know, friends and family, at this time when there's so much pain because of the economy, because of issues around the globe, many of us could do a miracle. We could do with a miracle of our finances being met, the mortgage repayments being met, the miracle of finding a job because we have been sacked, we have been let go, the miracle of keeping well, and if we have been affected by health issues, the miracle of actually coming back to wholesomeness and being restored, the miracle of provisions from an amazing God. And so Elijah is provided through this widow. And then sometime later, her son actually dies. Imagine the distraught, a widow, her only son dies. And she's distraught. And then she goes to Elijah and said, "What do I do? What is it that I have done? What has it been my sin that my son is taken away?" You see, sometimes tragedy happens and we blame ourselves. Yes, sometimes it is part because of our stupidity. Sometimes it's because we don't observe laws that have been put into the universe, into the world for our own good. But you know what? Sometimes stuff happens. Bad things happen. And it's not our fault, it just is. And so it is for this widow. Her son dies, a precious son. And then God inspires Elijah to go and do something which in this day and age of being PC and being very suspicious would be utterly unthinkable. He lies the child on the bed, and he actually lies on top of the boy and breathes on him 3 times, and miraculously the breath of life comes back into the son. He is restored. He gets up. Elijah takes him downstairs and restores him alive and well back to the widow. And this is what the widow said to Elijah: "The word of the Lord from your mouth, Elijah, is the truth." He was an eccentric man of God. And then in the 3rd year of the drought, when there was no rain, he declared there would be no rain. In the 3rd year, he then goes to Ahab, the wicked king, and said, "Assemble all the prophets, the false prophets, 450 of prophets of Baal and 400 others, 850 prophets, priests who've worshipped the false god at the time, assemble them all for what is become known as the Mount Carmel confrontation. He takes them and meets them at the highest point in the nation of Israel, in Mount Carmel. And then Elijah issues a challenge before all the people, before the king Ahab. And it says, if they set up a sacrifice, they set up the wood, and Elijah says, whichever god, whether it is Baal, the false god, or Yahweh, the Lord, whichever god answers by fire and sends fire down from heaven to consume the sacrifice, that is the real God. And everyone there agrees, yes, that is a true test of the true God. And so the 850 false prophets go about, they shout, they dance, they even cut themselves, thinking that that would actually bring the attention of the false god. But there's absolutely nothing happens. Absolutely nothing happens. And then it is Elijah's turn. And he asks the people to douse the whole altar and sacrifice 3 times with huge amounts of water so that it falls into the trench that's dug around that. Imagine if you want to set something alight, you want to light up a barbecue and you drench it thoroughly 3 times with water. It doesn't make sense. And yet this is what Elijah asked the people to do. And then at the time of the evening sacrifice, at the specific time that God inspires Elijah, he turns to the God of heaven and he asks God, God, show yourself to be the true God. And fire comes down from heaven, consumes the entire sacrifice. It even consumes the altar. And so then the people, recognizing who the true God, they say, the Lord Yahweh, He is God. And then after that, Elijah says, now, after this confrontation, after the demonstration, a definitive demonstration of who the real God is, Elijah now says, the time for the rain to be released has come. And so he asks Ahab to go and eat and drink, while Elijah goes back to the top of the mountain and he prays and he asks his servant 7 times to see if there is rain. And the 7th time, 7 being a biblical number of completion, the 7th time the servant sees a cloud the size of a man's hand, and soon after dark clouds and the rain comes. And Elijah says to the wicked king Ahab, get into your chariot quickly and go down the mountain before you're absolutely drenched and flooded by the rain. And so Ahab does. And yet Elijah, by the power of the Holy Spirit, runs down the mountain and overtakes the chariot of Ahab to reach the city. He runs. But then Ahab tells his wife, the wicked, evil queen Jezebel, what has happened. And Jezebel on that day swears that Elijah will be killed, swears that Elijah's life will be taken from him. And from a height of triumph on Mount Carmel, suddenly Elijah, this prophet of the true God, suddenly fear hits him. And he becomes fearful, anxious for his life, and he runs away. He runs away into the wilderness, into Beersheba, and then from there takes a 1-day wilderness by himself into the wilderness. He sits down by a broom bush and basically decides that's it. He had had enough. He was giving up. He says, I'm sitting down here. I've had enough, and I will sit here and basically die. Essentially, you see, Elijah displayed many symptoms of major suicidal depression. And he was rejected, he was fearful. It is interesting, isn't it, that earlier on, Elijah ran for a positive reason, because he was inspired and empowered by God and the victory from God. But then he runs for a negative reason. Runs out of fear, out of anxiety. You see, many of us run a lot in our lives. We are so busy. We may be doing good things, we may be doing positive things, or we may be running away because out of negative things, out of fear, out of rejection. You see, in the time that of the slowdown and restrictions, while I was going about daily activities, I suddenly heard in my spirit one word from the Spirit of God, the word Selah, S-E-L-A-H, which is a biblical term, which is a term found in the Bible that means to pause, to rest, and to reflect. And as I asked God what that meant, God said that was an opportunity. In the busyness of things, we are to stop and pause and rest. And there were two aspects to Selah. One was to offload. Offload things, offload our exhaustion, offload our concerns, our worries, our anxieties unto the Lord. Offload our cares into the hands of a loving God and Father. And so Elijah, in this case, he offloads, he pretty much pukes out all that he was worried about, and he says, I've had it, I want to die. And he goes to sleep, essentially with the thought that he will not wake up. And yet God was so tender and gentle. And God sends the angel of the Lord, touches him, wakes him up, and miraculously there was food and drink for him to partake. He drinks and he eats, but still exhausted, he goes back to sleep, again dejected. And a second time the angel of the Lord comes, again encourages him once again to drink more and to eat more. You see, the angel of the Lord was there. God met him in his physical needs. But then God does not stop there. God asks him a crucial question. What are you doing here, Elijah? You see, now after having addressed his physical bodily needs, God now addresses the needs of his soul. Because he has been dejected, he is fearful. And God says, what are you doing here? And then Elijah spews out, he says, I've done all these things and I'm no good now. I'm the only one left and I've just had it. I'm throwing in the towel, that's it. I've done all these things for you, God, but now I've had it. You see, God in his loving kindness does not actually rebuke him or challenge him on that. But God says, get up, stand up, and go outside. Go and now get up and go to the mountain of Horeb, which is the holy mountain. 40-day journey. And so Elijah gets up and he goes to Horeb and he goes into a cave there. Again, not really restored. He is gone, he's followed God, but he goes in a cave to hide. And then God says, no, you go outside the cave because my presence is going to come before you. You see, because Elijah, dejected, discouraged, fearful, he needed to have the reassuring presence of the God. He's the God that he is served. And so God then appears for him. There was earthquake, there was wind, there was fire. But none of these was actually had the manifestation of the presence of God. But then there was a gentle whisper that speaks to a man whose very soul had been crushed. God is so loving, he speaks to Elijah in a gentle whisper. And then he asks Elijah a second time, what are you doing here, Elijah? And Elijah spews out again, I'm the only one, and so on. You see, God understands whatever we're going through. He understands where we are at. And we can be honest, authentic to God. He's big enough and loving enough to take all our spew because he is such a loving God and an understanding friend. You see, some time ago during this period, as I was thinking and praying, and also talking with a few brothers and sisters, including a very good brother, Brother Gilbert, and a pastor, Pastor Rajan, I was reminded about the actions of a faith journey. And it was initially I came across this from a classic book written by Watchman Nee. And it talks about someone who runs, who sits. Different actions. We have been running for a long time in this crazy world. We are running, and then there's an opportunity to sit, the Selah, the pause, to rest, to reflect. And so we offload. But the second aspect of Selah is to download something fresh and new. And this is what happened to Elijah. God downloaded him something fresh. After experiencing the reassuring, abiding presence of God, he's downloaded something. God gives him a fresh assignment. He asks him to get up, to stand up again, and to walk. You see, when we fall, we only fail. We don't fail if we fall. We fail only if after the fall, we fail to get up again. We don't fail when we fall. We will fall. But we fail only if we fail to get up after the fall. And God understood that for Elijah. And so he asked him, after running, after sitting, he asked him to stand. And not only to stand, but then to walk. In the time that I downloaded in Selah, after my own offloading, God downloaded 2 words to me. The first word was return. Return to the ancient paths, as God said to Jeremiah in chapter 6, verse 16. Return to the ancient paths, to the ancient ways. In other words, return to the fundamentals of true living. Return to what is really important in life, not the props of life, that many of which have been knocked off because of what has happened globally. But return to what is truly important in life. So what they're saying is, what God was saying is return to the ancient path. And so God says to Elijah, return the way you came from. And now walk in those ways, and now I have new assignments for you. He asks Elijah to anoint 2 new kings of Israel and to pick a successor called Elisha. You see, because God understood that after we have stumbled, after we have feel that we've been useless, we have let the team down, let God down, the thing to do is to give the person, reassure the person they are still useful, that there's still use for them, and give them new assignments. And so God asks him, after Elijah has been running, sitting, he stands and now he walks. And so he walks and he anoints 2 kings and he picks Elisha. And Elisha then becomes his disciple for 7 to 8 years. And he follows him. And then one day, as they were walking, Elijah said, Master Elijah, to Elijah, grant me a double portion of your anointing, of your gifts, your abilities, of your empowerment. He says, grant me a double portion. And Elijah says, you have asked of a very difficult thing. And yet, if you see me as I leave you, grab hold of my cloak, you will have it. So Elijah was saying to Elisha that he had to have the right heart, be at the right place, at the right time, and do the right action. And so it is that as they were walking past, something extraordinary happens. But before I share that with you, family and friends, As I was during the period of Selah, of rest and reflection, the second word that God downloaded into my spirit after return was the word redistribute. And as I asked God about it, He said we need to redistribute the finite resources that you and I have. You see, all of us have limited energy, limited capacity, limited time, limited headspace. But it would seem that for many of us, and certainly I'm one of them, that before this period, I've been going around doing things which may have been good things, but using disproportionately too much of my limited resources to do that. And God is saying to redistribute those resources. You see, Elijah was doing amazing things. He was the prophet of God. He had done this amazing thing of declaring there would be no rain, declaring on Mount Carmel who God was, the confrontation with 850 people and the wicked king and queen who opposed him, and God secured a victory for him. He was doing amazing things, and yet God is saying now, no, I want you to go back to the ancient ways, and I want you to redistribute your resources. The time that you have left, the energy that you have left before I take you home, I want you to do something different. And so then that's where God asks Elijah to anoint 2 kings and to find a successor. Because God also understood that there is no success for a leader unless there is a successful successor. And so it is that as they were walking and talking, and friends, that is a really beautiful picture. In true friendship, we walk and talk with one another. Where we have issues, where we have things of the heart, things that really are impacting our lives, there is nothing like having a true friend who can walk and talk with us, grant us insight, a listening ear, a caring heart. And I hope and pray that, like me, you are blessed with at least a friend, a really good brother, a really good sister, relationally, not necessarily in terms of blood relationship, whom you can walk and talk with. But ultimately, as so many others have found, I have found that there is one friend, one person who is utterly able, utterly capable, utterly willing to walk with us, talk with us, and instruct and teach us and provide us insight and wisdom to walk in the ancient ways, to walk in the good way, as Jeremiah said. And that person is Jesus Christ himself. Friend, if you've never had the opportunity or never considered having Jesus Christ as that ultimate, true, complete, caring, loving friend, can I invite you as a friend to consider that and to put that into action? See, I believe that even as Elijah said to Elisha, to be with the right heart, to be in the right place at the right time, to undertake the right action. I believe this is the right time and the right place for you, friend, to do the right action. With a right heart that says, God, I have gone my own way. I have walked my own way. I have done it my own way, and really I've made a mess of it. Maybe, yes, in some way I've been successful, but now I found out through what is happening around the world, and is still happening, that those things that I've relied on, they don't actually mean much at all. They are props that actually do not sustain true, joyful living. Jesus is saying, extending an invitation to me as a friend. Jesus will be that true, total, willing, loving friend that will walk with you and talk with you. And so if you believe in your heart with the right heart, and now take the action of saying out loud, Jesus Christ, I believe you are God. I believe that you died so that I can have access and a deep, meaningful relationship with you, to be my best friend, so that the best that you who created and designed me and put in me can come out to pass, to be unfolded and manifest. If that is what you believe, what you want, truly with the right heart, can I encourage you, being the right place at the right time now, to do the right action. Say it out loud. Jesus Christ, I've gone my own way, I've messed up. Forgive me. Accept me into a deep, meaningful relationship with you, so that I can walk with you, talk with you, and you can be my best friend and bring out the very best of life in me and through me. Not only here, but through eternity. I hope you take this opportunity to do that, friend. And so, as Elijah and Elisha were walking and talking, suddenly, there was a chariot and horses of fire that descended from heaven. Elisha saw it and he says, my father, because Elijah was his spiritual father. He says, my father, the chariot and horses of fire of heaven. And so the chariot and the horses of fire come down and take Elijah up in a whirlwind up to heaven, and he was no more seen. You see, Elijah called down fire from heaven on Mount Carmel, but now he goes up to heaven within the chariots and horses of fire. You see, Elijah had been running. He sat down, having been totally dejected. But God encouraged him to stand up again and to walk. Not only was there run, sit, stand, and walk. Now he soars. He soars. He soars into heaven and into the very bosom and presence of the eternal loving God. And Elijah grabs hold of Elisha's cloak, which symbolizes his ability, his anointing, his empowerment. And he goes on to do double the number of miracles, 14 instead of 7. Double the number of miracles that Elijah did, because he had the double portion. Elijah was successful because God used him to raise a successful successor. And instead of a man who was ready to throw it all up, give it away, and indeed to fade away and die in his sleep, he becomes now literally a soaring figure of history with a successful successor. And to this day, Elijah is referred to as one of the prophets of history. So friends, as I just wrap up, I just want to encourage you that in our faith journey, it is a journey, and therefore it is action. And there are these 5 actions. We run, sit, stand, walk, and soar. Where you are may be different from where I am, where the next person is. But that is not important. The important thing is know that God, Yahweh, is with us, with you and with me. And He sits with us, He talks with us, He walks with us, He encourages us, He strengthens us for the journey right to the very end. And I encourage you as a friend or family to consider where you are in your faith journey. Run, sit, stand, walk, soar. Bless you. Shalom, shalom, shalom. Until we see you again, God bless.